theory. So we have a transportation system we can't really afford and that we're not really paying for yet.
By the way, Michelle, there is a question on chat if you want to answer before we move
on. Let's see. I don't know what I've done with my chat function. Hold on.
Or you can read.
Oh, there it is. I got the.
Perfect. Thank you.
I lost it behind something else. Let's see. Question here: do toll roads, in addition to that gas taxes, pay out enough for roads? And the answer is no, not really. Tolls. So every toll road that I'm familiar with is not paying the full freight of maintenance and capital maintenance, the long-term reconstruction of those toll roads, exclusively from the tolls. Now, in combination, the tolls and the gas taxes may actually cover the total cost. And in some cases, depending on the way that toll roads are set up, they can use some of that excess revenue to help supplement other transportation projects. But by and large, toll roads don't even really pay for themselves. They're still supplemented with gas tax revenue. But that's a really good question. So on to zoning. This is really the local regulations that influence the built environment most strongly. And we call it Euclidean zoning. So before we had zoning regulations, we used to build places like this. This is a main street, traditional town. You have shops, commerce, you have places to live or offices up above. People are walking, people can drive, they can access these businesses and goods through various means and modes. Seems like a pretty pleasant place. This is what we build with zoning. By and large, this is illegal under most zoning codes in the United States of America. Pretty much everywhere. You couldn't build this if you wanted to. Probably in the town where this picture was taken, you couldn't actually rebuild one of these buildings legally if it burned down, which is just insane when you think about it. But, we build this. This is the habitat that we build. It's primarily designed and geared towards cars, moving cars, storing cars. There's a sign here, for this wildlife habitat. I believe they're called pedestrians, whatever those are. Often discussed, very rarely seen. So we call it Euclidean zoning, and what does the father of ancient Greek geometry have to do with zoning? And one can come up with all kinds of creative answers because it's grids and lines and tangents and all that fun stuff. The answer is really nothing. Euclid, and I'll get to it in just a second, is a town in Ohio. So the birth of modern zoning really goes back to 1916 with the zoning code of the city of New York. It established setbacks and stepbacks, which drove the building heights. So the extruded form of the city that you see in these high rises from the 20s or 30s or 40s, these buildings are a product of that zoning code, which really told you how high you could build on how much of the lot. So the birth of modern zoning from a national perspective is really driven by the 1926 Supreme Court decision regarding the village of Euclid, Ohio, and Ambler Realty Company. Euclid is outside of Cleveland, and this realty development company wanted to put in this factory on this land, and the town had created some zoning codes, and they challenged it in court, and the town won, which provided the constitutional cover for every municipality in America to draft their own zoning. So zoning is really three interrelated concerns. You have form, which is the shape of the city. You have use and density, so the types of uses that you allow as an industrial, commercial, institutional, residential, and the density or intensity of that use. How much can you build? How many residential units per acre? How much floor area per area of lot? And then there's also a management component to zoning codes, specifying how people can move through the process. How do I get an approval for my development? How do I get the zoning changed on my property? So modern zoning is primarily driven by use density considerations, and then there's a pretty strong management component, and there's hardly any thought given to form. You have some rudimentary form dimensions in terms of setbacks or building heights, but it's really vague. It would be a minimum setback with no maximum. Building heights would not specify how many stories or how much stuff can go in there. It's just pretty vague. So definitionally, zoning codes are about dividing the land of the municipality into zones where certain land uses are permitted. The purpose of those regulations is to promote economically viable, livable communities and to balance the needs of business owners, homeowners, recreation, agriculture, and other community priorities. And the zoning codes are established by local municipalities, and that's delegated authority from the state government. The state government under the U.S. Constitution has police powers, and they've delegated those powers down to the local level. So in every municipality, you'll see something like this. There'll be a zoning map. This is the zoning map for the city of Punta Gorda, and we have various zones that permit you to do residential or that are specific special categories for government, environmental, and we have some commercial and mixed use categories, which mixed use is fairly rare for most zoning codes. We don't see zoning codes that permit residential and commercial on the same lot and the same zone, typically underneath the zone. So we're already a bit of novel. One of the main measures for determining the form that neighborhoods take in a typical zoning code is residential density. These two pictures are both of 4 dwelling units per acre. I don't know, I can't have a show of hands right here, but the one on the left here is far different from the one on the right in terms of the character of the place. And I don't know about you folks, I don't think I want to live here. And actually, I do kind of live in a place that looks like this because that's all that's available, because this is so much more valuable. I can't afford to live here, but this is where I would prefer to live. So it's interesting that the market is producing things that we viscerally don't find attractive, but it's all that's available, so that's what we consume. Another measure of that you typically find in zoning codes for the scale of development is commercial intensity, and that's measured in floor to area ratio. Both of these diagrams are a floor to area ratio of 1. It's 1 to 1 here with a 1-story building covering the entire lot. And here it's a 10-story building covering 1/10 of the lot. These are radically different urban forms. If you're on this, assume this is a sidewalk. This is a far different experience than being on this sidewalk where this building is probably surrounded by sea of parking. So far different urban forms, far different places, communities, but the same regulation could allow both. So planners are really at the center of a set of spheres of stakeholders with community residents and allied nonprofit associations, churches, schools, institutions, business owners, the government in terms of elected officials. We have different levels of government and different concerns, and the utilities concerns is far different from fires. And you have federal and state agencies that can help drive development, like our water management districts in Florida, which govern how stormwater needs to be managed and have a huge say on the way that sites are developed because of that. And then you have the development industry, developers, large property owners, attorneys, land use attorneys, and then planning and private development consultants like engineering firms. Most major engineering firms here in Southwest Florida have planners on staff that are helping navigate projects that you may be designing through the regulatory and approval process. So, developers, if you've ever had any dealings with a developer, they usually look really slick. They have the money to buy nice clothes and have nice cars, and you're like, gosh, what's going on there? Maybe you don't want to be a developer. And it's an interesting business. And the sort of development 101 tool is the pro forma, where you figure out, the basic site information. How is this, what's the soft cost? What are all you fancy engineers going to charge me for designing the project that I can get permitted and built? And then the actual construction cost of the project. And what revenue am I expected to return from this? What am I going to be able to sell the residential units for, or rent those units? What kind of revenue am I going to get back from rents? Am I going to hold this project for the next decade? What kind of financing can I get? How much do I have to return to my equity investors every year? Does the project pencil out? So before they even talk to folks like you, a developer's already gone through this process of seeing if a piece of dirt for that price with these general rules is workable or not. And being a developer is really divided into two spheres. You have this sort of piece of cake development scenario where property is entitled. So entitled by virtue of the comprehensive plan or zoning code of the municipality for certain development rights that you think pencil out and you can build. And that entitled or by right development is simply file an application and go through a staff technical review. In Florida, it goes through the local government and, of course, through the water management district, and then get your permits. Start building the building. Get into vertical construction and stop hemorrhaging money and start making money from having product to sell and rent. So on the other side of the coin, where you don't have development entitlements in place, so let's say an agricultural piece of land on the edge of town that isn't yet entitled, you need those entitlements, and the only way to get them is to go through regulatory processes which require public hearings, quasi-judicial public hearings, decisions by elected boards and bodies. Those entitlements, subdivisions, rezonings, changes to the comprehensive long-range plan in the state of Florida, special exceptions or variances. And then once you get through that process, which can take anywhere from 3 months, depending on the complexity, up to a year or more in the state of Florida, depending on the complexity in the municipality. And then if you're successful, you need to go all the way back over here to this piece of cake side and do all of this work. And all of this can take another year. And as we know, time is money. So a developer may have capital risk for 2 years before they start making revenue, and over a year before they even know if what they plan on doing is possible. It's going to be permitted. So it's a tremendous fraught game of risk. So they earn those $1,000 Italian loafers and $10,000 suits. So in the brain damage process, you submit the application to staff circulates it. There's a preliminary report to city council. There's community consultation. You recirculate that. You have revisions. You have to go back. Yada, yada, yada. It's a lot. And that's why it takes so long. It's not a quick process, and it's mandated under that enabling legislation at the state level. In Florida, we have the Growth Management Act from the 80s and updated through just a few years ago. That really drives how that process, dictates how that process goes through. If you become a developer, different types of groups of people that may come out. You have the sort of direct action people, the NIMBYs, the cave peoples, the YIMBYs. YIMBY is an acronym, stands for Not in My Backyard. Cave people is Citizens Against Virtually Everything. And YIMBY is a new sort of direct advocate that you're starting to see more and more in places, particularly in places where housing costs have gone through the roof. And that's yes in my backyard. People who want to encourage development to infill those vacant places and to intensify or expand the number of residential opportunities in the community or the number of businesses that are close to their residents. So that's an interesting dynamic that's starting to occur as we're running out of cheap, easy to get to land. On the other side of the coin, you have a lot of advocacy groups. These can be professionals like the Urban Land Institute is a professional organization primarily driven by public sector developers that advocates for the highest and best use of land and really advocates for creating value in communities through their initiatives. We have the sort of grassroots organizations, like environmental groups, like the Sierra Club, or other types of groups like that are steering development one way or another in the hopes of making better policy decisions. And increasingly in the 21st century, we're starting to see a lot more astroturf groups. So groups that sound like they should be about, be driven from the grassroots, but really they're funded by private industry. So, Citizens for Clean Water may be a group that's funded by agribusiness or, the phosphate mining industry, as an example.